Hey guys, welcome back to Large Scale RC Nation. This is your host, Brandon Gunn. Part 1 of the bad news, and now we're going to jump into part 2 of the bad news. I hope you enjoyed the previous video. Let's jump into the video. So if you're following along with us so far in the manual, we're going to be on step A5. And what we're going to need for this part of the build is a root beer. I know you're going to be super tired from building this servo saver. It was so fun building, and let's go ahead and enjoy our root beer. And also go ahead and grab your steering posts and your two M5 by 12 millimeter tapered screws, and we're gonna install that with some Loctite onto the chassis. So per the instructions, if you look at the diagram, it's going to tell you to degrease the nuts, and you're also going to use a Loctite. It doesn't specify what Loctite, but typically you're going to use blue on pretty much everything unless it gets hot, which would be the motor, which will use the red. The reason being, blue will break down and churn more into a lubricant, which will allow the screws to back out, and red deals with the heat. If you want to use red on this build, you can go ahead and do that as well. What that will do is you'll need to heat it up with some type of heat source, like a pin torch or a lighter, something to get it hot enough to break down the Loctite to remove your bolts. Otherwise, you'll strip them out. So for this build, I'm going to go ahead and use the blue Loctite. Okay, you will need to cut the tip off, as it is a molded piece. So you're going to cut the tip off. That way you're able to apply. And you're only going to use a small amount of Loctite. You don't need a lot. And just coat the threads. That should be plenty enough. You're going to need a 3 millimeter for this bolt. And stick your steering post on the top, and you can see it's recessed, and it will fit right here in this rectangle slot. So we'll go ahead and stick our bolt through, and just go ahead and spin that on, get started. Push it down into the slot and go ahead and tighten it down. Make sure you get it nice and tight and let that Loctite dry. We will do the same for the other side. Now we will need our front chassis brace, the 3 lock nuts. Lastly, you will need 2 to 3 of the M5 by 20 millimeter tapered bolts. Put one aside for the next part of the build. And we're gonna stick these lock nuts inside of our front chassis brace. The first one will snap in there like so. The second one is going to go into this slot right here. As you can see here. And the last one is gonna be for the top portion of the brace. As you can see here, make sure that your nylon part of the nut will actually be upside down, if you can see it here. And these ones will be right side up. We will now take these and run them through the bottom of the chassis into the brace. You will need your 3 millimeter Allen wrench. And we're gonna go ahead and place the first one right here. The second one will go right here. Go ahead and get it started. All right, get it nice and tight, and then add your second one into the slot. And these will thread into your locking nuts. All right, with both of those tight, your front chassis brace is now on. The next portion we're going to install is going to be your dual servo bracket. You're going to need 5 of the screws, and the screws in here are going to be the ones that are in the bag. These are M4 by 12 millimeters, and we'll go ahead and just grab 5 of those. With your bracket in place, with the screws that hold on the servo facing inward towards the front chassis brace, go ahead and flip it over and install the screws into the chassis. Okay, so this is the orientation. I know there's a lot of holes here. It's gonna be these 3 straight across the top, and then you're gonna have this one right here, which will be parallel with this one, and this one right here, which will be parallel with this one. I suggest starting with the center hole and go ahead and get that kind of snug where you can still move it around, but where it won't bind. So go ahead and start with that one. And once you get that, you can move the brace around and line up the holes and go ahead and start your next set of screws. I also recommend hand tightening into new plastic. If you use a drill, you have a chance of stripping out that plastic, and then you're not gonna have a very good bite. So now we have our servo bracket installed. Now in the second bag is gonna be your side guards. So go ahead and grab this bag now, and we're gonna open it up and use the rest of the screws that we just used to install the servo bracket. For the side guards, the portion with the lip right here is gonna go towards the front of the chassis. Follow the contour of the side guards with the body itself, and the holes will line right up. This will take 3 for each side, so grab a total of 6. And you will need your 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench or hex driver, and go ahead and run these screws in on both sides. Just get each one started and then go ahead and snug them up afterwards. All right, these 3 are nice and tight. Let's go ahead and flip it over and do the other side. Okay, our 6 taper screws are installed and our side guards are ready to go. Now for step A6 of the manual, we are going to install our servo saver. You will start with 2 of the bearings and go ahead and just slide those onto your steering posts. With them completely at the bottom, you can go ahead and insert our servo saver. Now just make sure the orientation is like this, and slide that right onto the steering post and make sure it sits down right onto the bearing. Once that is complete, we're going to stick our top bearings on. And go ahead and work those right inside. And you're going to verify that everything moves nice and freely. Once again, you're going to see that this is a pattern. You want everything to move freely. There should be no binding at all, which will make your car faster and work less and be smoother. Now that the servo saver and bell crank is on, next will be our top chassis brace, our body post. Snap that into the holes, and you will need your skinny long tapered bolts for this. Flip it over and go ahead and run those right into the chassis brace. This will be a 2.5 millimeter as well. Now remember, don't Hercules these, just get them nice and tight. When you feel resistance and it starts to stop it there. Don't strip it out. All right, there's our 2 bolts installed. Take your chassis brace, go ahead and sit it on top of your bell crank and steering servo saver. You're gonna take your 3rd bolt that you used for the bottom of these posts, and this is gonna go right in the center, which will mount with your front chassis brace. We'll take the M5 by 16 millimeter button heads, and we're gonna run these into our steering posts. Make sure that you add some blue Loctite to these. Once again, we're gonna use a nice little thin coat of blue Loctite. You don't need a lot, because otherwise it's just gonna seep up everywhere. And just in case you need to work on these again, you'll be able to back them out, but these will keep it from coming up once it glues. Nice little thin layer as well on the last one. And like I said in previous videos, you only Loctite when you're going metal into metal. If you're going metal into plastic, there's no need for it because it acts like a lock washer. This will take a 3 millimeter. You don't need to go super tight as it's plastic, and you'll just wallow it out. Verify again that everything is working smoothly. This one we can get nice and tight. All right, our top chassis brace is installed. Everything moves nice and free. So hold your lock nut that's on the bottom of this that we placed earlier, or if you set it to the side, go ahead and put that in now. You're gonna hold it with your finger as you're gonna thread the ball into that locking nut. Once you get it started, then you can let go. You don't need to over tighten it, just get it nice and snug where there's no play. All right, it's nice and tight. If you already mounted your servos, this is how it will look installed. For step A7 in the manual, if you're looking at the manual, we will be installing our fill tank with the fill tank braces. So go ahead and set this to the side. With our chassis set to the side, we're going to be using bag A3, our fuel tank, and bag A4, which is the brackets for the fuel tank. With the remaining screws in the bag, place these off to the side. These are going to mount your fuel tank to your chassis. Let's take 2 of our M4 by 16 millimeter button heads and place the washers on them. So we're going to go ahead and push these through the rubber grommets and take this bracket and place them into the holes and tighten it down with a 2.5 millimeter hex driver or Allen wrench. Make sure you don't over tighten these rubber grommets as they act like isolators. Just get them nice and snug where you don't see a gap on the backside. All right, we're good there. We will take another one of these bolts with the washers, and you're gonna run it from the bottom up. And this post will go parallel with the tank, and it will screw into this bottom hole right here. That's nice and snug in there. And this will go into our bottom grommet with the washer and the screw. Run it down into the grommet. And it will go into this diagonal hole right here on this bracket. Okay, now we have all three of the brackets installed. We will now install the field line bracket. You'll need the small little button head screw. Stick it in the hole, and this is gonna face towards the front of the fuel tank. We will also use a 2.5 millimeter. All right, that's installed. It's nice and tight. Just make sure you don't over tighten it. Once again, plastic. Go ahead and set these aside. This is going to be when you install your field line. We will now use the rest of the screws in the bag to install our fuel tank inside these three holes right here that's shaped like a backwards L. We will install them in these two holes, and this hole as well. So let's go ahead and install it. Okay, I started with this one and worked my way down. Just get them all in kind of snug, working your way down, and then once they are all in, then you can go ahead and tighten them down the rest of the way. All right, our fuel tank is now installed. All of them are nice and tight. Here you can see the fuel tank installed. So now you can fine tune your isolators. Just make sure that you don't push it in so much that it bevels out the rubber. You just want it where it's just touching both sides. This helps with vibration of the motor so it doesn't shake the fuel tank as much. So you do want it to be able to move freely a little bit. Okay, if you have not already installed your servo, this is all the parts that you should have left, which will be the 2 screws for the servo, the little hose clamps for your fuel line, and your spare drag link. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to Large Scale RC Nation. I hope you enjoyed the beginning of the build of Rose. This was bag A. Next week will be bag B. Tune in as we build this bad boy up. Now, please make sure that you subscribe, give it a big thumbs up, and hit that notification bell to see further videos.